Hi everyone. My name's Mike. I run a marketing consultancy business called MP&Co based in Manchester. And this is the second event in a series of three that we're producing with Bruntwood Works. And this session follows on in our theme of recession-proof marketing. And this week we're going to be talking about knowing your numbers and why that is so important. So, knowing the numbers that will drive your business growth, like one of the things that we have a lot of experience in with clients, and in my previous roles working as a marketing manager or head of marketing in a couple of different businesses, is that a lot of business owners or business leadership teams really struggle with either knowing the numbers that are going to drive the business forward or communicating those numbers down to marketing. And there ends up being a real challenge between marketing people wanting to invest and wanting to do new ideas and come up with new campaigns, and then leadership challenging those people on what actually is that going to deliver for the business, and does that link with our growth objectives in general. And on the flip side, there is so much information available within marketing and so much data available that it often gets to the point where that really becomes challenging to digest and really turn some of those softer metrics that we see, all of that data around social media or paid or website performance, etc., and really help translate that to people who are responsible for finance in the organization as to what's working and what's not. So this session is going to focus on a few different areas. We're going to talk about some of those problems. We're going to talk about ratios, which I'm going to come on to in a bit. We are going to be talking about how to forecast for campaigns and for BAU, so business as usual marketing activity, which I'm going to come on to later, and budgeting, and a couple of different ways that different types of businesses budget for marketing, and I suppose some of my perspective on how it should be budgeted for. Before we get into that, I've just got a little slide here just to show the context of what I was talking about. So last year, reportedly, there was nearly 10,000 different types of marketing technology tools available. And this slide just covers a variety of some of those. Now, this is fantastic. It's fantastic for marketers because there's so much different tech that we can use to make our marketing better. It's also really challenging because there is so much data available from all these tools that we've then got to interpret and we've got to put a value on. And it's really, really difficult to often be really accountable for what we're spending and how we're justifying what we're spending. And I suppose ultimately like how that links to the growth objectives of the business. There's so much data, it's really easy to get lost in those numbers. So this session is all about like going back to brass tacks, really, really simple strategies to think about how we can understand the numbers that are actually going to drive the growth of the business. So that problem causes a number of different things. If you don't know the numbers that really are going to drive growth in the business, if you lack that understanding of the numbers and how you're actually going to measure if you're on track to achieving those numbers, it causes all sorts of problems. So the lack of a target and means it's really hard to understand actually how you're going to meet those targets. It means you often work very reactively rather than proactively. If you don't know what you're working towards going forwards, you're always kind of taking advantage of opportunities without knowing if they're going in the right direction, or you're just desperately sort of chucking things out, trying to drive sales without an understanding of that if what you're doing is going in the right direction. You're kind of makes it very difficult to make decisions for the rest of the growth of the business if you're always working reactively. It makes things a lot simpler if you're working towards an aim and your strategy is all designed to help you achieve that. It's vital to know your profit margins overall, but also our product and service. If you don't know that, or if your marketing team don't know that, it's really hard for them to focus on what the right kind of customers or the right kind of products that are actually going to drive growth in the business. It surprises me how often some of our clients don't know the average order value of their products or services, or most importantly, the lifetime value. So some of the challenges that we see are clients, misunderstanding how much they should be investing in marketing to capture customers at an early stage, and maybe thinking that it's too expensive to capture them at an early stage because they're not taking into account how much that customer might be worth to them over the lifetime of the business. So they're unlikely to just purchase one product. Over the course of a year or 2 years or 3 years, how much you're willing to spend on them to get them through the door could change depending on how you understand their value. Likewise, a lot of customers don't understand their conversion rates at different stages of the buyer journey. So often that information is really easy to get if you're an e-commerce business, for example, from Google Analytics. But if you're a B2B business or a service-based business and you rely very much on different human touch points in the sales journey, they don't understand, what are their conversion rates at all those different stages. And we're going to come on to that when I talk about ratios in a minute. And then a few other metrics like customer churn rates. Like by churn, I mean how many customers actually leave you during a calendar year, and what's the percentage of that? Because a lot of the time, marketing is focused on getting new customers in all the time, and not so much focused on retaining current customers. And if you don't know like your churn rates within your whole marketing process, then it's difficult to understand where to put budget to either counterbalance losing customers or help retain or reactivate old clients. So it's important to understand those kind of things. So a summary of this section is that we really need to understand all the real key numbers within the business and within our marketing strategies to help guide where we should be investing money, and help us monitor how we are spending it and how it's performing. So it's vital to get all of these kind of numbers together and really think about in your own particular businesses, what are the key numbers that are going to be really helpful to guide things in the future. So if we don't know these numbers, it'd be really difficult to understand where we're going as a business, how we're going to get there, when we're going to get there. So deadlines are really vital, and deadlines for targets and objectives are really important. How we'll know if we're going to get there or not. And I suppose finally, and most importantly, if we do actually make it, if we get there, how do we get there? And how can we do it better, cheaper, and with more profit next time? If we're not tracking those numbers and we're not measuring against those numbers at all times, it's impossible to continually optimize, improve, and help grow in the future. So numbers, really important, essentially. Little case study here. In the last session that we did, we talked about Glastonbury and we talked about their campaign methodology that they would use to, and I want to kind of reference that now. So we talked about Glastonbury. It's an amazing event. Everyone wants to go to it. It sells out every year. One, because of it's such an amazing experience, but it hasn't always been like that. It's evolved and it's grown over decades to be what it is now. But we talked last time about how it sells out in minutes every year. And the reason it sells out in minutes every year is because they have this huge, vast database of people who have pre-registered their interest in attending the event. Because they've got this huge database, and I reckon it'll be at least 3 times the capacity of what they need. In reality, it'll be 100 times the capacity probably of what they need, or if not even more. They've got so many people who actually want tickets, and they've only got a certain amount of tickets to sell, 142,000, that supply and demand tickets outsell every year. So ticket sales alone, 340 quid a ticket, that's nearly £48 million in ticket sales in revenue. So Glastonbury know their numbers. They know how many tickets they've got to sell. They know how much they're going to charge for those tickets. They know when they're going to release free registrations to build that market, to build the audience, and they know when they're going to release actual ticket sales, which means that by the 6th of November every year, they know that they've sold out. They then know they've got this huge audience that they can go and pitch to advertisers and generate even more revenue through sponsorship and advertising. And they've got an understanding of how much they've got to play with to put on another amazing event, or even grow it and grow it and grow it again like they do every year. So Glastonbury, a really nice, simple way of showing like why it's so important to know your numbers, but also then work out how you can proactively create campaigns that help you achieve those numbers. So this is a little activity to take away from this session. What I want you to do after this, or if you want to pause the video now, go ahead and do it, is do this little activity. Work out over the next 15 minutes, what's your target? And you may think about what's your target for the next financial year, or maybe for the next 3 months, or maybe for the next month for your business, or for a particular campaign. But just think about the context. What is your target for the particular length of time or activity that you want to do? When do you want to achieve it by? It could be the end of the year, it could be the end of the month, etc. What would make a good ROI? And by ROI, I mean return on investment. So how much would you be willing to spend to deliver a return, and what return would you want? So think about what makes a really good return on investment. How and when you're going to measure the progress. So for example, if your objective is to create a campaign that's going to generate £100,000 in revenue over the next 3 months, how are you going to measure that if you're on track with that? So what metrics are you going to use to measure if you're on track with that, and when are you going to do it? Weekly, monthly, quarterly? Thinking like that. And then finally, think about what your conversion rates are. There's going to be lots of different people watching this with all different types of businesses. If you're a e-commerce business, for example, you might be thinking about your online shop general conversion rate, or conversion rates from different channels. Or if you are a B2B service-based business, you might be wanting to think about conversion rates at different stages of the buyer journey. And the next little section I talk about will maybe help you help inform you on some of that. So ratios and metrics. So metrics are obviously vital in helping us understand how we're going to measure performance, but they're also vital in helping us kind of proactively plan out the activity that we're going to do. So this is a little exercise that I've based on a typical kind of B2B, and by that I mean business to business, service-based business who delivers a consultancy service into another company. So in this situation, we've got a scenario where the annual order value, or AOV, for that client is 50,000. So every client they get, they tend to have them on a retainer, and over the course of a year, they will generate £50,000 per client. So a nice little simple scenario. Now, to explain this little table on the left here, we've got a few different metrics and we've got a few different ratios that we want to explain. So in this situation, this company wins business by pitching their offer one-on-one in a meeting or presentation scenario, and then the potential client will understand if they've got any value, and they'll sign off or they won't sign off that project. So in this scenario, we've suggested that for every 2 presentations the company delivers, one of them will convert into being an actual customer. So they've got a 50% conversion rate from presentations through to completed clients. Nice and simple. And that helps us at that starting point understand that if we need to generate 10 new clients, for example, we need to deliver 20 presentations over the course of the year. Now, working backwards, before that company delivers any presentations to potential clients, firstly, they need to understand if the people they are speaking to are ready to be presented to. So they will have maybe speaking to lots of different prospects all the time, and some of them will be ready to buy and others won't. So to achieve that and to understand it, they need to qualify them. They need to have a call with them and start to discuss, what they want, what the company offers, whether they align in terms of their values, things like that. So we call that a discovery call. So they'll be using discovery calls to decide who are they going to try and present their proposals to. So again, in this situation, we've got a 2-to-1 conversion rate. So 1 in every 2 discovery calls they make will turn into a presentation. So working up the funnel again, like we've explained. So if we need to deliver 20 presentations, we're going to have to deliver 40 discovery calls. And then the next metric we're going to use is what we call an SQL, or a sales qualified lead. A sales qualified lead is a lead that the business has generated that has been through some sort of qualification within the business. So not everybody that we meet or becomes a lead within a business is someone that we're going to do business with. We need to understand whether they're right for us, as well as whether we're right for them. So we need to do some level of qualification. So what we will do typically is, look at their websites, maybe get them to complete a questionnaire, maybe do some due diligence on them in some shape or form. So what we've got here is another ratio, a 3-to-1 ratio. Every lead that we get into the business, 1 in 3 will be someone we think are going to be relevant to then organise a discovery call with. So this again gives us another ratio to manage. So taking the example here, if we want to generate 40 discovery calls, we need to generate 3 times as many prospects that are qualified to work with. So we need 120 prospects. And then finally, at the bottom, we have got our MQLs. So an MQL is a marketing qualified lead. So this is leads that have come into the business that have generated by marketing. And again, not all the leads that we get, people coming in through advertising or downloading a white paper or being met at an event or coming directly to the website. All of these different leads that come into the business, not all of them are going to be relevant to the business, obviously, to become a sales qualified lead. So again, we've got a ratio here, 50% of all of those leads will become a sales qualified lead. Therefore, to work out our sales strategy for the year is quite simple once we've got these ratios. If we want to deliver 20 presentations, we need to generate 40 discovery calls, which means we need to qualify 120 prospects, which means we want to drive 240 leads through marketing. So nice and simple. Now, understanding these numbers means that we've got the basis of our strategy. The exciting part now is to work out, one, how are we going to get in front of 240 potential leads? What activity do we need to do to raise awareness and drive traffic right at the top to drive 240 people who are interested in working for us? Next, of that 240 people, what activity are we going to use to qualify them and help us understand if they're worth speaking to? Next, what are we going to do in our discovery calls to help give those people the best perception of us as a business, but also help us get as much information about them as possible to understand if they're a good potential client? And finally, how are we going to make our presentations so good that at least 50% of people want to work with us? If we can nail all that within our strategy, we'll be well on track to delivering the objectives that we've got here. Cool. So this next slide is just an example of how that might work. So I've used this example of the Do lectures in the previous example, previous presentation that we did. The Do lectures is an organisation that provides training, that provides amazing content, but what they also do every year is provide the Do event. This is a snapshot of Do 22. The Do event is like a mini festival, learning experience. It's a combination of all different kinds of educational events and entertainment, bringing together entrepreneurs and people who want to do something monumental and help and inspire them on their journey. So the Do lectures put on this event every year, and their marketing strategy is really, really impressive. It's really clear that they want to, at each stage, capture attention, generate leads, qualify those leads, and then get them to buy tickets, building an audience. So we've got an example here of what they may want to achieve. I don't actually know the numbers behind the scenes, but let's imagine, I believe last year there was a fixed number of 100 tickets to be sold. So I imagine, looking at their ratios, that they wanted to sell 100 tickets, then they wanted to pre-register 1,000 people who are interested in those tickets. So by doing that, they've got this massive audience that want to come, and it basically means they can inflate their price to such a level that they can generate, really good revenue and really good profit because they've got massive demand for the tickets that are available. Okay, so their marketing strategy was all about generating excitement and getting people to pre-register. Moving up the funnel to generate 1,000 people who are registered, let's say they wanted to engage 5 times as many through all the different activity they were doing. Email, content, social media, paid advertising, all of those different things. And then working up again to engage 5,000 people, let's imagine they also now need to be aware or get aware 5 times as many people on top of that. So 25,000 people across the country need to be aware and be seeing content about the do event of the year to be able to capture enough of those people's attention to engage them, to get those people so engaged that they want to give information, to register, and to get the people who registered so excited that at least 10% of those people want to go and buy a ticket. Simple as that, really. So what they did was really clever, and part of what they did, just to explain it in terms of the registration element, is helping qualify the right kind of people to come to that event, but also creating a real sense of urgency and a sense of scarcity. So the pre-registration process was quite involved. You had to basically fill an application form in, explaining why you should attend, what you're going to bring to the table. It wasn't a free event. They're charging hundreds of pounds to go to the event, but they made it so exclusive by really trying to get people to show, why they should be there, what is so good about them and their idea that they should be allowed to even come and spend their money to go to the event, which was very clever. Which means that they're making sure that the quality of the event is brilliant every time, and the great people are there, and also creating so much scarcity that people are willing to pay a premium to attend. So a nice example there of why building your market like that helps you preserve your prices or increase your prices and run a profitable business. The next example here is from a completely different type of business. So we've used an example of an e-commerce business in a business to consumer environment. So perhaps let's just use the example that they're selling a pair of shoes and their average order value is £25. So every time someone comes and purchases something, they typically spend about £25. So this is a really, really simplistic example for an e-commerce business. So that is a caveat to this. Obviously, sales are going to come from all different places. Different customers are worth, different amounts over the course of their lifetime. And there's lots and lots of different factors to take into account when building a business plan to grow in an e-commerce business. But there's some simple things to think about when planning your metrics around this. So we've got some simple metrics here. Firstly, our average annual customer revenue. So here we've got, typically once we've got a customer, they will typically spend £200 with us every year. That's a nice starting point to understand, what a customer is worth in the long term. Next, we've got our site conversion rate. So how many people or how many visitors to a website actually end up converting and buying a product. We've got our kind of standard average e-commerce conversion rate here of around 5%. We've got a cost per acquisition. So a cost per acquisition means how much does it cost to acquire a new customer? And here we've got £10. So for every customer that we acquire for the business, it's going to cost us £10 in advertising spend. And then finally, we've got our retention rate. So how many customers, what's the percentage of our customers every year that stay with us and make more than one purchase since conversion? So these numbers all help us to form a business plan. It helps us understand, what activity are we going to have to run to grow the business in different ways. So for example here, if we want to drive £500,000 in revenue, we need to drive 2,500 customers spending £200 each per annum. Each customer needs to make on average 8 purchases. That'll be a total of 20,000 sales across the business. We need to drive 400,000 site visits to achieve that based on the conversion rate. And this is going to require, based on the cost per acquisition, an advertising spend of £25,000. Now, these numbers then help us shape how we're going to use marketing through each stage of the funnel to attract, to nurture, and to retain people within the business. So another kind of very simplified view of how we would use numbers to drive the business forward. Okay, so the next couple of slides we're going to be talking about how are we going to forecast revenue across the year and different strategies around that. So we've got a campaign model here, which I talked about in the last session. So many businesses use marketing, the phrase campaign, as terminology in different ways. So a lot of people will say, any bit of marketing we're doing is a marketing campaign, and they will call all marketing, campaigns. For me, campaign is a very, very specific word. A campaign is something which is focused on achieving a really clear objective. It is a methodology to achieve that objective, and within that there will be deadlines of when things need to happen. There'll be a very, very carefully thought out strategy to achieve that objective per campaign. There'll be metrics to measure, there'll be responsibilities for different people in the team, and there'll be real momentum. So how we use campaigns is very much focused on a objective driving machine, essentially. So this slide kind of shows over the course of a year, a business might run 4 campaigns quarterly to drive real momentum within the business. We've got another couple of slides here which kind of show, let's go back one, what we call baseline or business as usual marketing. So this here is kind of all of our standard marketing that will go out every day, our social media, our SEO, our advertising, things that are just, always on activity that will happen throughout the year. And what we do is overlay that activity with campaigns. So we've got always on activity, and then we've got some key campaigns during the year where big stuff happens. So we're kind of go big campaigns to really drive growth. So here's an example here of how we can use this methodology to forecast our revenue over the year and work out how we're going to generate results across different things. So we've got an example here where we've got a target for the year of £1 million, and then we've got 4 campaigns that we're going to run throughout the year, and we've split that revenue across those 4 campaigns in slightly different ways. So not just quarterly, it's exactly the same every quarter. This is what we're going to drive. We've split it in different ways so that we've got a January to March campaign, which is going to generate 250 grand, a April to June campaign, which is going to be designed to generate 150 grand, a summer campaign, which is designed to generate 300 grand, and then a winter campaign that's designed to generate 100. The reason that's different is because, for this model, I'm kind of basing it on a business that was going to be seasonal, So the start of the year is a busy time, the summer's a busy time, but spring and winter isn't. So we've adjusted the percentages of growth that we're expecting based on what we expect to turn. But you'll notice at the bottom here, we've got this business as usual activity, which also has revenue attached to it. So we're envisaging that every month our standard day-to-day marketing that we do all the time, email, organic search, organic social, networking, paid media, partnerships, all of these different avenues that are designed to get you in front of more of the right kind of customers is going to generate revenue. And we've suggested here that every month we're going to generate 17 grand in revenue from these channels. And then supporting that, we've got these big campaigns. Now, this helps us from a budgeting point of view understand where we attribute a budget and what we attribute that to. And it helps us plan out the year, and it helps us plan out the budgets that we're going to use across different things. But it also helps us really focus. By working on a campaign methodology, it helps us really focus on delivering those objectives. Okay, so the next activity we want you to do, following the last slide that we talked about, is to have a think about the numbers that you want to generate, let's say, across the next financial year, and how are you going to plan those numbers out throughout the year. So what's your annual target? How will that target be split across the year? What will sort of standard marketing activity will you be running all the time, and how much revenue will you attribute to that you want to generate? And then, are there any campaigns that you can run throughout the year that are designed to achieve some of those bigger numbers? So what campaigns will you run? When do you think you'll run them? Perhaps your business is seasonal, perhaps it isn't, perhaps you're just going to do one big campaign across the year or multiple small ones. Just have a think about how you could plan out your year and plan out your budget to deliver that revenue. So nice little activity, just start thinking about planning out the year. Cool. So the next section I want to talk about is budgeting. So I've worked in lots and lots of different businesses before, and as a consultancy business, we work with all sorts of businesses, big and small, and all of them kind of budget for marketing in slightly different ways. I've kind of brought together 3 different options here to kind of give you some guidance on what you should be apportioning, and maybe to think about how to apportion on marketing spend. So there's no simple rule. All companies have different goals, they have different markets, they have different business models. I would say that it fluctuates very much between 5% of their annual spend to 25% of their annual spend, which is a big number. But depending on what their objectives is, there are lots of kind of big tech businesses who don't even have anything to sell yet, but we know who they are, and they'll be marketing to us all the time. And their goal is to drive an audience, to build an audience that are ready to then become customers when they've got something to sell. Monzo is a really good example of this. Before Monzo Bank was launched, they had nothing to sell, but they marketed for a good 12 to 18 months to build anticipation of what is actually going to be available and help the audience like have a vote in what this new online banking product is going to be. So all their marketing was driven around creating a waiting list for people to get this new banking software, which was very, very cool. And to do that, they had to, register their interest, but then they also had to give ideas and they had to refer people, and all of those things enabled them to be closer and quicker to actually get the product when it launches. So that's why I mean, like, every business has a slightly different objective as to what they do, and then as a result, how much they would use for marketing spend. For Monzo's example, they had a big marketing spend to build an audience so that when they were ready to actually launch it, it would really, really fly. So there's 3 different examples here about typically how businesses will budget for marketing. So firstly, revenue based. Often businesses will kind of think, right, roughly we're just going to apportion 10% of what we forecast the business is going to grow by this year. 10% of that total revenue we're going to apportion to marketing. We see that a lot, and businesses will come to us and say, this is the finite budget. It's based on 8 to 10% of our revenue. This is what you've got to play with. So there's some pros and cons to all of these ideas. Firstly, the pros. So what are the pros of a revenue-based percentage marketing spend? One, it provides a nice simple figure so that you can budget and you can plan that spend across the year. It's designed to be manageable for the business because it's come from a number that's generated by finance or the business owner to be comfortable for the business. And I suppose it can be increased or decreased relatively reactively. The cons of it, though, is not particularly agile. You've got kind of a rigid spend across the year. It's based on a number that was kind of imaginary at the start of the year. We don't know what we've achieved. We may have known what we've achieved last year, but we don't know what we're going to achieve this year. We're aiming for a number, but we don't know if we're going to get there. So it's not particularly agile. It's based on forecast, not reality, and it can be quite restrictive. The next, the way of budgeting marketing that we often see is top down. So rather than a percentage figure that somebody's come up with, often a business owner or a finance director, for example, will kind of instruct marketing what they've got to play with and advise them to stay within the parameters. So they've kind of picked a number that works based on the projections of the business, without much real thought of whether that number is relevant, and told the marketing department, here's your marketing budget, go and spend it. Pros, again, is quite handy for planning for the finance people, because it's a nice simple figure to work from, and it's designed again so it's really manageable for the business, so it's not going to put you out of business, which is great. However, it's very, very restrictive. It forces marketing, I think, to be very cost driven rather than opportunity focused. If you know you've got finite budget, it focuses you to think about things that you can do cheaply or really drive down costs, rather than scouring all sorts of different opportunities and kind of taking every opportunity on its weight and kind of promoting it into the business. And I suppose thirdly, it's really difficult. Business changes every day. Like, there's always different situations which cause business to be good or business to be bad, or new technology or new opportunities that come up. And if you've got a very top-down, fixed, rigid budget, it becomes very difficult to play with. So the third option is goal or campaign driven. So going back to our campaign model with all those cool different pyramids, this is where we have a budgeting model which is completely focused on delivering a particular objective. So within that objective, we then have forecasts. We understand the channels we're going to use. We understand the ratios that we've used at the start of the session to understand, what we have to achieve and how we're going to achieve it, and what it's going to cost to drive potential leads, etc. So this kind of goal or campaign-driven budget is really agile, is really entrepreneurial, it's focused on delivering a real particular result, and it's basically based on reverse engineering success. We know the ultimate aim, we can work backwards in terms of all of our ratios to understand how we're going to get there and what activity we're going to do. It's a really agile and entrepreneurial way of running a marketing budget, but it requires a very close relationship between marketing and finance. By finance, I mean it could be the finance department, or it could be the person who's actually holding the purse strings within the business if you're a small business. You have to have that close relationship. It has to be built on trust. Each has to be involved in the planning stage to get buy-in, and you have to be able to work out what you want to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, and what it's actually going to cost to achieve that number. To do that, you also need very solid data that you're going to track along the way. It needs to be efficient, and like I said, you need to have trust, and you need to be really, really flexible throughout it. So I think in essence, in reality, not one of these different ways is going to be perfect for every different business. In reality, there's a combination of all three. You need to be quite pragmatic when you're planning out for marketing, but I think the key thing is that you don't underestimate what you need to achieve those numbers. In a lot of situations that we see clients having big ideas of what they want to achieve, but then tiny marketing budgets based on a very kind of rigid idea of what they want to achieve. And that marketing budget and the strategy around how they're going to use that is never going to achieve these big numbers, because it's just not capable of doing so. So if you're going to aim for big numbers, you need to work out all the different steps along the way that you need to do to achieve those numbers, and work out what each of those steps are going to cost, and then come up with a budget which is realistic. And the final little top tip here is always allow an additional budget for testing, just a small budget every month or every year to try new things. If you're really rigid in what you've got to spend, then that's fine. Just apportion another small amount to test new ideas, because if you haven't got the budget to test things, you're never going to learn what what new things will maybe potentially really help turn the dial. So it's a budget which you're not too bothered about. You're not too bothered about if it works or it doesn't work, but you're allowed to use it for new opportunities, to try new things. And that will help keep an element of entrepreneurialism within the marketing team. So the final slide I want to talk about is working together. So marketing and finance, whether the finance be the business owner or whether finance is a finance team in the business, what we see is the best way for businesses to grow is for both these teams or both these people to be working really well together. There's always a challenge when marketing is constantly asking for money from the business and becoming frustrated because they're not getting it, or the finance team becoming really frustrated because marketing are asking for stuff and they don't know what it's going to deliver or why they should bother with it or whether they can afford it or what it's actually going to deliver within the business. So we need constant communication between these two teams. You need to combine their knowledge. So make sure that those two teams are sharing and understanding, which areas of the business they both want to grow, how the growth plan is going to dovetail with the overall business plan, what growth means in terms of profitability. And a lot of occasions I've seen businesses who are asking marketing to drive sales, but not telling them which products or services are most profitable to the business so they can really focus on where they're selling. And help them understand, what is appropriate to spend to achieve that growth. We've got a blog on this topic, and it goes into more detail. So, like I say, in summary, both should be working really close together. Understand what those ideal growth targets are in terms of clients and sales. What's appropriate to spend? Which services are most profitable? How clients spend splits across different products and services, which clients or regions are most profitable. It's all data that's really, really vital for marketing to know so that they can do what they need to do to drive that growth, and to be able to come up with recommendations that are data backed to help the business understand what's financially possible. So that is the core of what we want to talk about in this this session. We've got a summary here of just a few of the acronyms I've used in the session today because marketing loves an acronym. So there's a few different ideas here, and a few explanations of some of the things that we've talked about. A key thing I want to end on is here, what are you going to do next? Go and do those little activities. It'll help really plan out the next 12 months of the business. And there's loads more information in the ebook that we've got called Build. Build is a program that we've developed to help businesses understand how to drive their business forward through really well thought out campaigns. There's loads of information in there about designing campaigns and budgeting for campaigns, and it is available to download. And there'll be a link available in the slides, but also in the follow-up email from the Bruntwood team about how to use that information to really drive the business forward. So thank you so much for your time. You're very welcome to contact me if you've got any questions about this. The website is mikepiemarketing.com, and you can contact me on email on mike@mikepiemarketing.com, and either myself or one of the team will be more than happy to have a chat with you. Thanks so much for listening today. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to get in touch, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.